Welcome to the Ministry Mix podcast, where we're bringing you real conversations for the souls and strategies of ministry leaders. I'm Phil Gifford, and I'm joined by my co-host, Richard Pope.
Hello.
Whether you're a seasoned pastor or ministry leader or just stepping into church leadership for the first time, we're here to share stories, insights, practical, hopefully helpful tips to help you lead strategically and care for your souls along the way. Each episode, our goal is to dive into topics that matter to your mission, your calling, and just personal growth.
Today, we're going to be talking about something a little bit different. Today, Phil and I are each going to share 3 stories that are just weird. You know, when we were learning and preparing for ministry, we were taught that everything was going to be easy, right, Phil?
Oh, yeah.
Clean and nothing would go wrong.
Learn Greek, expositional preaching.
I use Greek every day.
Exactly.
But what we found is that there's some weird things that happen when you're a pastor. If you're a new pastor or even a new ministry leader, I just want to warn you now. There's going to be some weird stories. So what Phil and I hope to do today is to each share 3 quick stories of something weird that's happened in our ministry experience. And in that, maybe a quick lesson or maybe just a quick ha-ha. We'll see as we go. Phil, do you want to go ahead and start with the first story?
I don't know. Are you ready for this first story?
The paper says dead body.
Yes.
Get ready, listeners.
Okay, well, here we go. Again, the point of this whole episode is to remind each other and remind ourselves that weird things happen. And they test your leadership. They teach you about leadership, but also you just can't be ready for all of them. So here was my...
Were you ready for this one?
I sure was not. So we were at the first church. I was the lead pastor nearby here. Good church. We enjoyed our time there. But as we were there, we kind of were on a road that was in an area of a town that wasn't necessarily always the best kind of traffic going through. And we had this unlocked dumpster that way anybody in their community could just throw stuff in and put stuff in and just move on. And so that would happen and our members would use it too. And that was perfectly fine. But we had this unattended, kind of in the dark corner dumpster. So one Wednesday night,
this is a great start.
This hard to go down from here. It's hard to go out from here. I mean, I went for a run after church Wednesday because there's like a nearby park in the community. I go for a run before I went home. And in the middle of the run, our secretary, our administrative assistant, she calls me and she's like, you need to get back to the church right now. There's all these FBI cars here. There's these police here. They're roping off the whole church. They found a dead body in our dumpster. So
stranger than fiction.
Now, so I couldn't get back to the church. They had it all roped up. I just went home. But come to find out, one of the people in our community, you're not going to believe this, one of the people in our community cannibalized their roommate. I have to be careful how I share this so we don't get like filtered or something, but
sure.
They cannibalized their roommate and threw the leftovers into our church dumpster. And there was this regional search for this missing person that ended up at our church. Now, this is over 10 years ago, so it's if I'm laughing, it was not a laughing matter at the moment.
No, I don't think it's funny. I think it's extreme. Like, it's awkward. It's crazy. It's like uncanny.
There was no seminary class for dead bodies in your dumpster. So I go home and we do our best. This is before group texting. This is before like a lot of like tools. Oh yes. So I try to let our church know because we have Wednesday prayer night. We have service that night. And so like they can't come because there's like literally like a crime scene and FBI and they're doing all this stuff.
Again, I'm not laughing because it's funny. I'm laughing because Phil's telling this story. So it's insane.
Yes, it's crazy. And so we text everybody, tell them don't come to church. It's like, we're not having a service. There's an investigation, blah, yada, yada, yada. Well, wouldn't you know, in every church, you love your entire congregation. But there's 1 or 2 people you don't want to be the face of your congregation. Like if you were to say, I don't want you like representing our church to the community.
Sure.
Those were the 2 people that showed up that night with all the news cameras there, the helicopters and everything. And so I'm watching the news and we were doing a series called New Life. And I had a picture of hands digging into the dirt, pulling like planting like a little flower, like, those like, it's such a cheesy little graphic that every church in the 90s used. We just happened to use it in the 2000s, but it was like a little flower coming out of the dirt. And like, so there's this giant blow up poster in the front of our house, like, come learn about New Life. And so the news starts out. this church may have been celebrating life, but what they found today was death.
That's so bad.
And then it flashed to
That's
those,
so hard. That's so bad, Phil.
and then it went to those members that were like, well, I just came to pray and here with all these cars. And so like nobody said anything weird, but oh, what a pastoral moment. So in all of that, the funny thing was my wife was cleaning out the nursery as one of the random jobs that our wives do on Sunday. And she's like, man, it smells like a dead body in there. It smells like somebody died in there. And true enough, it's what happened. So weird story, but obviously like we're laughing about it now. In the moment, it was devastating for the community because like that's a dark crime to have done in your neighborhood.
Murder's horrible.
Yeah.
Cannibalism is like another level.
Yeah,
I mean,
like
the disrespect of life.
And there was some dark stuff we're not going to get into in this podcast that are associated with that. But like the community was gripped by that. So like if I had to pick a couple lessons that I learned from that, it's crises are going to happen in your community that are looking for a pastoral voice.
Wow.
And so what we did was we prayed, like we got the community together. We opened up our doors so people could come in and pray for the community, pray for each other if they had questions. So we had a community prayer service where, like, man, so many people from the community came to pray for neighbors, the families impacted. And so we prayed. So you're going to lead through crisis. And even if it's as simple as leading your people to pray in your community to pray together. So, but man, what a crazy story. Oh, and by the way, a month before I got ripped because I suggested we put a lock on that dumpster because I literally said anybody could throw anything in there in a business meeting. And people were like, well, we don't need a lock. Man, when you ever have those moments where pastor, you're kind of like, I told you so.
Yeah.
That was one of those moments.
Did they get a lock after that?
We got a lock the next day.
I bet you did.
It did not take much time. So there we go. There's my weird story. Can you top that?
There is no topping that. So I feel like it's good that one went first because here's what's crazy. There's a good chance you'll never have a story that crazy. There's another level. So I have a much more tame story, especially for you ministry leaders, maybe in an associate pastor role or just staff leader. I was working at a church, and I won't name it, but God was doing some good things there. And not my current church, but I was there. I was growing. I was super young, and I basically got brought on as the everything pastor. You're the youth pastor, worship pastor, creative pastor, tech pastor. You also take the trash out. Like I just kind of had a role that changed based on the church. The church grew like 10 times while I was there. They hired a bunch of people all at once, and it was incredible. It was a cool story. Church was like 30 and about to close, and it grew to almost 300 over 2 or 3 years. But in that season while I was there, our lead pastor, good guy, was just struggling with some mental health issues. The story is weird, but he's doing much better now, and he's okay with me sharing this. But what was so unique about this is I'm maybe 21, and I get a text message 12 minutes before service. It was exactly 12 minutes before service because we had a 10-minute countdown, and I remember going, 2 minutes later we need to do that.
Yeah.
And he says, "Hey, brother, I'm not in a season of preaching."
What does that even mean?
I still am not completely sure. It meant that for the next 8 weeks, I preached. The first 2 weeks, I preached that week. I was like, "Hey, brother, like praying for you. Don't know what's going on." And I remember just opening my Bible or whatever I read that morning. I was being like, "Well, Jesus, take the wheel," and not like the crappy country song. And we got through it, and the Lord moved it. It was good. The following week, I was like, "Okay, we're back to normal now." And then, sure enough,
not in a season of preaching.
15, 20 minutes before, not in a season of preaching. So I called him after that service. I said, "Hey, man, we can't keep stumbling. Do you want me to just like do this?" And he's like, "Yeah." So I ended up preaching a 6-week series. I think it was through Ephesians, and it was fruitful and it was good, but it was so unique. And what's weird about that story is the lead pastor didn't show up to church for 8 weeks with no notice. And I was young and I didn't really know a lot. Now that's an extreme version of that, but I promise you 2 things. One, young ministry leaders, the people you follow, even the best leaders, will let you down sometimes. And 2, you got to constantly be growing and developing, because if you're not, there's going to come a moment where you're going to have egg all over your face because someone else is going to drop a ball, and guess who catches the ball? You. Yeah. Lesson I learned from that, seriously, was this. 1, always have a back pocket sermon, or 8.
or a series.
But two, to be ready to step in to any role above me. So if you're a ministry leader, I would encourage you, like if you, let's say you're the assistant to the youth pastor, cool. You should be ready to lead youth ministry one week if they're not there. And just making that a rule for my life has been super helpful ever since. I've also never had another leader tell me they're not in a season of preaching since.
Can we just stop that for a second and acknowledge that sometimes ministry leaders do weird things and make it sound spiritual.
Yes.
It's just not my season right now to
Yeah.
preach. Like, what in the world does that mean? Like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm sorry. Did God stop giving revelation? It should be a little feisty, but that's weird, right?
It's called a sabbatical.
Yeah.
And you plan it and you go on it.
Yeah.
And
you-
it's not
or-
a surprise.
Or if it's sin, you call it sin.
Right.
Like, hey, I'm stumbling some areas and I need to step out of the pulpit. So like, don't make it sound vaguely spiritual, like God's leading you another direction for temporarily.
Now I'll win here, and I can share this. Me and this
Sorry, am
brother
I being
are
too mean on this random story?
No. This brother though, he was battling some mental health issues.
Yeah.
He ended up. I left the church, pursued church planting, etc. But he's in a much healthier place. The church is thriving still, and he's the pastor, and he's healthier, and his marriage is healthier. Everything's good.
Well, now I feel bad.
Yeah, it
So-
wasn't a sin thing so much as it was just mental health. But a lot of times things like that happen because of
Yeah.
sin. It's like, no, you don't have it's not a season issue. It's that you slept with your secretary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It goes
That
back
wasn't
to,
his case, though.
It goes back to a lot of things we talked about is transparency and authenticity go a long way when you're leading people.
Yeah, they do.
So,
right,
here's
Phil, your turn.
Here's my next one. This one's a little less spicy than the
Morbid?
dead body. Yeah, morbid is so. I have to be careful. I don't know. We were at one point we started being sued as a church, or we were threatened to be sued as a church early on in our church planting years. And it was, I don't want to get into the details of it because there are some legal elements here, so I want to be careful. But we were in the first year of our church plant, and I get a call from a person, another ministry, and I was like, "Hey, by the way, we're suing you guys for X, Y, and Z." And he's like, "Do you have a problem with that?" I'm like, "Yeah, well, the Bible does." So let's talk about that. But I'll keep this story short again because I want to make sure that I respect everybody in this. But
Yeah, don't get our podcast sued.
exactly, yeah, we're too young to be sued at this thing. So, but what was weird about it is I never in my wildest dreams thought that the battles I would face in church planting were from other churches and ministries and pastors.
Yeah.
Like that there was this claim to whatever, or this idea that our first response was not, brotherly engagement, but it was actually like cease and desist letters. And the funny thing was, so that just prepared me to realize that, man, this battle is weird that we're in. But what I found was that it was almost ironic. For the first year of church planting, every time we'd have a major spiritual victory, the next wave of legal issues was like the next day. So like we would do a giant outreach, see somebody get saved, have our first baptisms, whatever it might be. And the next day we'd have an additional letter or new problem show up. And it's like, are you kidding me? It became a joke. Like we would have a big outreach event and get like 3 new people to come to our church. And Pam and I would be on the ride home going, well, I wonder what legal issues we're going to have tomorrow. Yeah. And so like that would show up. So it just reminded us that Satan loves to distract you from your calling and good work. And he'll sometimes use Christians to do it. Like we're in a real battle here, and we just had to be kind, but stand up for ourselves. And by the way, the BCMD was amazing at this, our network of churches, our Baptist Convention of Maryland, Delaware, because my first call was to Tom Stoll, and he helped connect me with some really good Christian legal advice and people. And so like having a brotherhood of people that you can call in that moment was really critical. But I never in my wildest dreams thought year one church planting was a lawsuit dealing with. Now, it never came beyond just letters and recognition. So it was totally just a random story.
Yeah,
But
it's still,
weird, huh?
It's still disheartening, I think.
It was just discouraging, like for sure. Like, hey, we're all trying to do kingdom work here.
Yeah.
Like, why is this a thing?
Yeah.
And there was no sin on anybody's part that was leading toward this, by the way. Like there was no sin. It was literally just ministries bumping into each other, I guess.
Yeah.
So craziness. How about you?
You know what you call ministries bumping into each other?
I don't.
Fellowship.
Sometimes, right?
Not legal issues. This next story is actually pretty positive, but it got me made fun of a little bit, including by Phil.
Oh, I sure did.
Yeah. So
Gimmicky.
2020, dude, it worked. It worked. What can you say? It worked. 2020, we're renovating a building that we're going to launch our church in 2021 in April. We got 10 grand from a partner. We had 10 grand that we raised, and then we get a contractor, and we find out we need 10 grand more to make it work. So we're sitting there and we're like, man, how do we raise the money for this? So we decide that for 24 hours, I am going to preach live on Facebook in our dingy, unrenovated former taxi office building that we're trying to renovate into a church. Now, here's what kind of adds some spice to it is the day that we started the 24-hour Hope-a-thon. It was the 23rd of December. It was going to end 24th, Christmas Eve at like 9 a.m. So 9 a.m. to 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. to 10 a.m. I can't remember. The day before that was my first chemo treatment when the cancer came back. So I'm literally getting sick, like not feeling well, just got told I have cancer, and I decided I'm going to preach for 24 hours on Facebook. So super weird, right? The thing is, most of the stories, in fact, this might be the only story that was self-inflicted. Yes. All the other stories seem to be outside things. But yeah, so we're trying to raise the money. We start doing the 24 hours. Here's what's incredible though. We had like 15 businesses in our community sponsor it.
Yeah.
They gave us food, they brought us meals, and they weren't Christian companies. So we actually gained some relational equity with our community from it. And what we said is, hey, we're going to try and share hope for 24 hours while raising money to start a place to do hope. And the city kind of gathered around it. I wish I could say 8 million people watched and we made $100,000. We brought in exactly $8,300 of the 10 grand goal.
Okay.
During the 24 hours.
Yeah, that's great.
There's a cool story at the end of that. So we brought in $8,300, but this is what's really unique. We had 4 people put their faith in Jesus over, and I know there's it's like a televangelist Facebook thing. All 4 got plugged into churches, and I still am in contact with all 4, and they're actively serving in churches. So
that's good.
God did cool things in it.
Yeah,
but
it was a goofy idea though. It was fun.
It was super goofy, and it was like I don't think I would do it again.
Is that live stream still available? Can people go back? If people trolled you or Canvas page all the way back to 2000, whatever it was, could they watch it?
I can neither confirm or deny. I'm not sure. That'd be a Katie question. Katie's my assistant.
I will say I was one of those 9,000 people that watched it. No, I didn't hate it. I watched it because I was like, I'm pretty sure there were some of your sermons where you're like, Jesus.
Those are good sermons, bro.
Yeah, dude, the Holy Spirit was working through those sermons.
Those were some good sermons, bro.
Like the 3 a.m. ones when you're dead.
There's one moment. So our kids pastor David, we had a couch, like a $20 couch we bought for this event that we lugged into the building just to have somewhere to lay down.
Yep, I
There's
remember.
no furniture. David fell asleep. And so there were people, I would preach for like 30 minutes and there'd be like 10 minutes of like updates on the money and all that. And there's a moment where I look over and David is rolling up the couch. He's like asleep and the physics still don't make sense, but there's 3 other witnesses and we're just like, he's to give context, he's laying on the couch and he's rolling up the back of the couch and then he falls behind the couch and he wakes up and his head's bleeding and the whole thing was horrible. Here's what's cool. Event was over. $8,300. I go to bed at like 10 a.m. and I'm encouraged, but I'm also kind of discouraged. I'm like, I need this money like the 26th. It's like a Hallmark movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And if we didn't have the money, I wasn't sure there was a lot of unknown.
Right.
And I also was told I had cancer. I got a phone call from a deli in town, like an hour after I fall asleep. And he's like, hey, the Lord put on my heart to give you $1,700. He didn't know that we ended at $8,300.
Wow. He
just said the Lord put on my heart. And we'd already done ministry with them. He was a good friend of mine.
Yeah.
And he said that he was going to give to it, but never gave me an amount. And I was like, dude, you must have saw the live feed. He's like, no, I've been traveling. Lord put on his heart. And yeah, I think the lesson from that for me though, is that the Lord, if you're faithful and obedient, even a bad idea, as long as your heart posture is right, I think the Lord will bless it. I really do.
Yeah.
I think we spend too much time trying to have the right plan without having the right posture. And I'm not saying I was perfect, but I really did think, how cool would it be if we share the gospel
for 24 hours? It was great.
Raise money. And it worked.
Yeah.
Would I do it again? Hell no.
Filter. Just kidding.
Is that too spicy?
Nope.
Oh.
So here's my story that is, I actually got permission to share this one because it was relatively recent, but I get a call from one of my guys at our church, and he's like, hey, Pastor Phil, I messed up and I need some help, like really serious. And like, honestly,
I'd be worried if
when people call me like that, I think they're they got caught there on their computer doing something they shouldn't be doing, or they cheated on their, yeah, exactly. It's like the tone and was that kind of tone. And so I'm like, yeah, man, whatever. What can I do? So like, I'm going into counseling mode. I'm like thinking about the family. So like, I'm like ready to enact like pastoral work there. And the person goes, while I was out of town over the weekend, which continued to like push me to where I thought my mind was going. I spent too much time in the sun and I really burnt my back. My wife's out of town and I have nobody to rub aloe on my sunburn. And so I went from you're having an affair potentially to you just need sunscreen rubbed on your back. And so he's like, can I come over to your house and will you rub aloe on my sunburn?
This feels dirty, bro.
I was like, dude, I was just so glad I didn't have to do counseling that I was like, I'll do whatever you need, bro. Like I will bring, and then I hang up. He calls back 2 seconds later and he's like, oh, by the way, do you have aloe or do I need to pick some up? So I was like, no, we've got aloe.
Does this guy know that you're sharing this?
Yes, I asked permission first.
What's his name?
I'm not telling you that. Because as much as he wouldn't care, I would rather not.
Do I know him?
Probably not.
Do I play Fortnite with him?
No, you don't.
Oh,
so it's not. His name's not that. So he comes over, and I'm like, I don't know, I like extend my arms as far as they possibly can go, and I'm trying to rub this sunscreen on, and it is burnt so bad that it's actually hurting him. Like it's like doesn't feel good at all, and so he leaves. He goes, and I instantly buy spray on aloe because I'm like, if this happens again, I'm gonna be ready for this. So I buy spray.
That'll probably never happen again.
No, that's the thing.
Unless it's him.
And I just, you know what it reminded me though, like. Of all the weird ways I've shown somebody love, like that, or like as a pastor, you've shown that you care. Is probably a better way to phrase that. As a pastor, the weird ways that you show that you care. Why? Like sometimes as pastors, you just gotta support people in weird ways.
You gotta be careful how you say that.
Now I'm literally blushing right now trying to explain this story. But like
seminary should start issuing aloe with every degree.
Man, but like, hey, you know, meeting people's needs is a good way to do ministry. And so I was thankful to be on the short list to call, but I definitely was ready with spray aloe for any other time that would need to be.
So is the lesson to buy aloe?
The lesson is just to be careful with who you bring into your church.
I hope he doesn't listen to that.
No, I'm just kidding. Remind them to use sunscreen and prevent this. A lot of pastoral preventing. No, by the way, this family's amazing, and they talk to Jesus about more people than anybody in a church, I think. So like, I would happily help in any way I could. So, finish up our stories with one more.
Yeah, and this one's super recent also. So our church in the summer, historically, Canvas has been like 40% college, 60% young professionals, hipsters, young families. And when I say young families, I don't mean young families like Phil's church, like, you know, kids in elementary school, middle school, high school. I mean like babies. Like these families are 30-ish, 30 and under, a lot of 20-somethings who just had their first kid. So over the summer, we were like, we're going to grow in July, which in a church filled with college students is like almost impossible.
Yeah.
Because 40% of my church leaves. And we did like 70 hours. It was just insane. So much outreach, whatever. And the Lord blessed it, but we gained a lot of homeless individuals, which is really, I think, cool. So now Canvas is like a third homeless, a third college, and a third young professional, young family. Super unique context. But we had a baptism Sunday and we were baptizing 11 people, 12 people, sorry. And it was incredible and it was cool. But I go downstairs after preaching. So our sanctuary is an old school church. It's a 200-year-old church building. It's a museum now. We rent it on Sundays. Sanctuary's on the upstairs, fellowship hall, which we use for kids with an elevator down. And I get done preaching. Their closing song, closing announcements, whatever. And I'm walking downstairs to get ready for the baptisms. And I hear two people like screaming. And I'm like, what the heck is that? And I come around the corner. And there's two dudes just beating the crud out of each other. I mean, just actually fighting.
I remember this day. We texted about this.
Yeah, I got punched. And I run up in the middle. I'm like, stop it, guys. Like, trying to be a hero. And this one dude, man, he feels horrible still. He just right across the face. Just punched me in the face. I almost got knocked out, man. And I do mixed martial arts. I go to an MMA gym. I'm not a pro, but like, I'm used to getting punched. Gosh, he had a hit on him. So I get punched, and it turns out that this guy who threw the punch, about 35, there's this young guy who's homeless, like 18, and the young guy had started smoking a cigarette inside the church building that we don't own, by the way. This is like a community organization. We rent this old building that used to be a church. So I'm like talking to them, and I end up, praying with them, and we cool it out, and it's calmed down. Well, the kid who was 18 ends up putting his faith in Jesus, and he said he prayed, he received Christ. But I had another pastor was like, "Hey, follow up with him. He wants to get baptized now." And if you think it's legitimate, like we'll baptize him, but talk to him. We ended up baptizing the kid that day. But here's where this gets even weirder. We had 12 baptisms, 11 scheduled, then that extra one.
Yeah.
Somewhere along the way, someone peed in the baptismal water.
Okay. And they're not in there very long, though. Like,
not very long. And I don't know how this happened. And I've gone back and forth. All I know is I looked down in the water, and I can't remember which person it was because it's exciting. I mean, there's like 120, 130 people standing outside, baptisms. Like there was a couple spontaneous, and spontaneous for us means they talked to a pastor. It wasn't just like they jumped in, but yeah. And all of a sudden, I'm like, oh, it must just be. And I'll be honest, it must be some of the homeless individuals I'm baptizing must just smell like pee. Well, then I look down, and I see pee like bubbles floating. And I'm baptizing.
Are you in the water with them?
No, it's a horse trough.
I gotcha.
Outside, but I hug people after I baptize them. So I baptize, hug, and then I'm like, wait, I smell like pee. So we baptize. When we finally, I did not pee myself. When we finally get to the end of the baptisms, we have a bunch of strong dudes push over the tub. It's easier than pumping it, and it rolls down a hill. That's where we have the building, and you just see yellow clouds all in the water. I go home. So here's this thing. I go home that day. My jaw is bruised. My nose is bleeding a little, and I'm covered in pee. It was the dirtiest and filthiest I've ever left church. But lesson from it, it was so freaking worth it.
Yeah.
Sometimes good ministry is messy, and that was a very practical. But that's been my experience. And a lot of times when God's doing cool things like that, it's messy and dirty. And it was worth it. So
and that's why we share these stories, because most seminary guys, especially, but most people have a glorified and sterilized version of pastoral ministry, but it is way messier than we know going into this. And there's really no way to prepare. None of those stories, you have a seminary class that checks a box to get ready for that. There's just not.
Fist Fight 101.
Yeah, maybe they can teach mixed martial arts in seminary. They probably should.
Especially the way the Christian Twitter is.
I know. The way the world is going, you should learn to handle yourself.
Yeah.
But good ministry takes place in the messiness of brokenness. And so whether it's shepherding somebody by rubbing aloe on their back or standing in pee water to do a baptism, God's doing some cool stuff.
Yeah. Or finding
a dead body in the dumpster that brought the community together in a realization that this is a dark world and needs Jesus.
I think a master takeaway from this whole thing, a macro thought for me, God does not waste faithfulness.
Yeah.
So if you're faithful, it might get weird and messy and chaotic and discouraging, but if you're faithful, Christ is going to reign supreme and God's going to do incredible things.
I love it. Well, hey, if this has been a helpful episode to you and you found value in our discussion, make sure you subscribe to our podcast. You don't want to miss an episode. And also take a minute to review this, give us some feedback, because that helps us to reach more ministry leaders like you. If you got questions, we'd love to hear from you as we build out content for future episodes. Let us know some of the conversations you're having and would like to have or like to be a part of as we share and learn together. Our goal is to help you lead more strategically while caring for your souls. So thanks for listening to Ministry Mix.
Bye.